So as we've been kind of working our way through this passage, this book of Mark, that he has written to help us understand and see and know and worship Jesus. This is the point, right? He's presenting Jesus. This is God presenting Jesus to us through Mark. And we've been working through this book, and we've seen the ways in which he is highlighting certain things about Jesus, and wanting us to notice certain things about him and how he talks and the things that he does and the ways that he interacts with people. And really, like, the past few weeks, we've been really seeing the ways in which he's emphasizing the power of Christ. The power of Christ in and through some pretty miraculous things that Jesus did. He's sort of proclaiming to the world the nature of who he is through the power that he has over all of creation. And all realms of creation are under his kingship. And so this week we see that Jesus is in and around this this Sea of Galilee area, and he's doing all these amazing things, and there's these crowds that are kind of hearing about what he's doing, coming around to experience the scene of whatever's happening. And there's quite a bit of people listening to him, interacting with him, witnessing the things that he's doing. And here in our passage today, we see that in the midst of all of this guy, probably like a Pharisee kind of a guy, a religious ruler type named Jairus, comes up to Jesus and comes to him in the midst of all of this sort of crowd and frenzy. And we see here in verse 23, and he's imploring Jesus, earnestly imploring him, right? He's coming to him with a great urgency and need, and we see why. He says, my little daughter is at the point of death. And he comes to Jesus because he believes that Jesus can do something about it. He's not just reporting that to Jesus, like, oh, just to let you know, my daughter's dying. He's like, no, he's coming to Jesus because he has heard about him, and he's imploring Jesus to actually do something about it. And so there's this great urgency, this very prominent figure in the society there, and he's coming to Jesus for help. And so Jesus interacts with him, he hears him, and then Jesus is moved by this, and he agrees to go along with him. Okay, so this is the scene that we find this in. So put a pin in that, and we're going to put that on for next week, right? And so Jesus is on the way with Jairus to go and see Jairus' daughter. That's where this is happening. In the midst of that, as they are going, Jesus is interrupted. And this is where we're going to focus our time today. This interruption that happens as Jesus is going with Jairus to his daughter. So Jesus is in the midst of doing something seemingly very urgent, right? And he's interrupted. I don't know about you, I don't like to be interrupted. Especially when I'm about the Lord's work and I'm doing very important things, right? To me, that would be a very agitating thing, seemingly. But Jesus, he's interrupted by this woman. And that fact, in and of itself, at this period of time, in this culture, in this society, would have been a very sort of scandalous thing. It would have been scandalous enough if it was just the fact that it was a woman. But this wasn't even just an ordinary woman. This was a woman, as we see, who is, as it says, has been suffering from a discharge of blood for 12 years. Okay? And just for clarity here, right? Just to be clear, when it's talking about this discharge of blood, this is talking about a menstrual issue. That's what this is. Now, for obvious reasons, and maybe, contrary to some of the current cultural opinions about this, I am not fully able to understand the full sort of toll physically that a person menstruating nonstop for 12 years would have on a person. I can imagine that it would be, in and of itself, significant. But, as bad as the physical toll would be, and it would be significant, her condition here is actually much more significant than even just that. There's a depth to her condition here. There's fallout of what's happening to her that goes far beyond just the fact that she's struggling and suffering for 12 straight years physically. This woman is living in a Old Covenant, Old Testament law setting, right? And she finds whether she's probably a Jew living in this area, or likely. And let's look and see what the Old Covenant has to say about her situation. Let's just read this. Listen to this. Leviticus 15. We're going to see exactly what the situation was for this woman. It's probably different. Not probably. It is significantly different than that sort of thing happening now. Leviticus 15. If you have a chance to turn there, turn there. If not, you can just listen. In verse 25. Now keep in mind, this is her every single day for 12 straight years. Okay. Verse 25. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, not at the time of her menstrual impurity, or if she has a discharge beyond the time of her impurity, all the days of the discharge she shall continue in uncleanness. As in the days of her impurity, she shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies, all the days of her discharge, shall be to her as the bed of her impurity. And everything on which she sits shall be unclean, as in the uncleanness of her menstrual impurity. And whoever touches these things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, she shall count for herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and bring them to the priest, to the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall use one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her before the Lord for her unclean discharge. 12 years of this. Imagine living every moment of every day for 12 years in the midst of that. That's your reality. Everything that you do, everything that you touch, everyone who touches you, everything that you sit on is declared unclean. Significant. For 12 years, this woman was largely treated very similarly to the way that you would treat a leper. It's a lot of the same kind of treatment. She was cut off from human contact, right? No one could touch her. Because it says right here, if you touch her, you're unclean. Cut off from normal social life. She's cut off from her family, likely. And for 12 years, she's prevented from worshiping God. She can't even go to the temple to make a sacrifice. For 12 years, she's stuck. And we see here that she wasn't just like taking it lightly. She was doing everything that she could. She was exhausting all of her resources, all of her power. She was going to every doctor, every specialist, everything that she could think of to do to help, and it just wasn't helping, and she was stuck in this state. She was cut off and cast out, and there was nothing that she could do about it. She was desperate. But somehow she hears about Jesus. Somehow the word got to her that Jesus was doing amazing things, and he was healing people, and he was helping people. And she finds out. And we don't know all that was happening in her heart. It doesn't tell us, it doesn't give us a ton of insight into what she was thinking as she was going. But you can just imagine, in the midst of her desperation, she's willing to try anything, but she approaches this with great desperation. I don't know, maybe she truly believes, or maybe she simply just thinks that Jesus is some significant figure who would heal her with sort of his aura, right? This was kind of a common thing to at the time. Like people often treated people like, Alexander the Great and some of these prominent figures with sort of the same kind of mindset. If you could just kind of get around them, that it would kind of rub off on you, and you would kind of pick up on some of their greatness and their aura and all the things that they had. But maybe she actually did see him as some sort of representation of God. The fact that Matthew and Luke, right, both mention that she touches the fringe of his garment. There could be significance there. That could have been part of her thinking. The fringe of the garment was a significant thing. It was something that people who were observant Jews would wear, tassels and fringe that had representation of God's faithfulness and God's love and God's commitment and commandments to his people. It was sort of a symbol of God's love to them in some ways. Maybe that had something to do with her thinking. We don't know. But we do know that she's desperate for help. And she believes that Jesus can help her. That's what we know. She's desperate for help, and she believes that Jesus can help her. She doesn't know maybe exactly how, but she believes that there's significance to him, that there's power in him, that she's heard of amazing things that he has done. So she sees him coming. And remember her state, right? She knows the nature of the reality that she lives in, that she is unclean. And so this helps us to understand maybe some of her thinking as to how she approaches Jesus and why she approaches Jesus in the way that she did. She's desperate, and she thinks, maybe if I could just kind of sneak in the back and just touch the fringe of his garment, that would be enough. So she makes her way through the crowds, and she finds a way to get to Jesus, and she does. She touches his garments. And when she does, Jesus knows. Jesus knows. It describes like Jesus recognizing that something has happened. Power has left him. And he says, "Who touched me? Who touched my garment?" Now, in my opinion, I don't think Jesus was actually wondering who touched him. I think he knew who touched him. I think he was doing that intentionally to draw attention to the matter. He wasn't like, "Wait a second, who did that? Show yourself." Like, it wasn't that, I don't think. I think he knew who touched him, but I think he wanted to draw attention to it because of the significance of what would have happened, the significance of her even putting herself in that position. And his disciples are like, "Dude, we're in a massive crowd of people. What do you mean, who touched you? Probably like 1,000 people touched you. There's all these people around you. What do you mean? How could you be asking who touched you?" Right? So this is where I think Jesus is cutting through. He's not just wondering who touched him. He's drawing attention to the matter. He's drawing attention to her. And he's doing something really significant. And Mark, throughout this letter, he's showing us all of these things that Jesus is doing, incredibly significant things, right? Not only are we seeing Jesus' power and Jesus' authority over, in this case, sickness and disease, but he's also showing us what he is like, right? He's not just showing us the power and the authority, he's showing us what he's like in the midst of the power and the authority. Jesus, make no mistake, Jesus is putting his just massive, raw, unadulterated, unchallenged power and authority on display here. This isn't any hint of weakness. This is pure power over creation being put on display here. And this brings us to our first point. But he's doing it in a profoundly kind way. Jesus amazes by displaying his power through kindness. The same amount of just pure raw power, but put on display through a very kind thing. If we could just stop for a moment and think about some of the things that we've just seen Jesus do here in Mark. Some of the things that we've read about, even just in the past few weeks. Jesus is putting his power on display against things about which we have no power, no hope against. The sea. No one in their right mind goes to the ocean and stands there and feels powerful. Right? That's foolishness. I'm not a huge beach guy. I go to the ocean maybe like up to my knees. That's all you're going to get from me. And that's why every time I go, I would say, I'm like, everything in the ocean is trying to kill you, including the water. It is. It's trying to kill you. And it doesn't care about you at all. Right? It doesn't care. It will kill you. I have no chance against the ocean. But Jesus speaks and the ocean sits down. Right? It just sits down and goes, "Nope, we're done." We have no shot, but Jesus flexes his power, right? A man who is possessed and controlled and his whole life is overtaken by demons. And Jesus, without even breaking a sweat, just goes, out. And they go, they gasp, right? They become afraid. See, this is not weakness. This is power. This is real power. And this woman here, this incurable, no doctor can wrap their mind around it. They have no medical procedure, no medicine, nothing can help. And Jesus is like, the fringe of his robe, the collar of his shirt is powerful enough. Gone. Instant. Incredible, massive displays of power. But they're not just simply displays of power. They're displays of power through kindness. Jesus could have shown up and he could have performed feats of strength, right? Like Festivus. Some of us got that. Kind of a niche joke. But he could have, right? He could have shown up and just put on display just raw feats of strength, right? When I was a kid, we had this thing called the power team. Again, I'm just dating old man jokes up here, right? And they would show up at churches. There were these Christian guys with big muscles, and they would like rip these phone books in half, and they would break baseball bats. And everyone was like, dude, those guys are so strong. I guess, I don't know I still don't know why. Like, It was like, wait, are you strong or is God strong? Or like, what's going on here? But they were like a Christian, like, strongman team, right? They were just putting on feats of strength, and at the end they would like read a Bible verse and be like, yeah, believe in God. And we're like, okay, whatever you say, man. Yeah, don't hurt me. Google the power team. You'll find it. It's funny. Jesus could have done that, right? Jesus could have shown up, he could have just taken all the trees of earth and just stacked them up like Lincoln logs. He could have done that. And everyone would have gone, wow, that's amazing. That is a feat of strength. It was totally within the possibility of his power to do that. He could have taken all the mountains and just stacked them up like Legos. He could have easily done that. But he wasn't just here to just put on display his power for the sake of his power. He came, and the things that he did showed just as much power as those things. To be able to say to the ocean, to the sea, sit down and shut up, and it listened to you, that's not insignificant. But he did it in ways that were incredibly kind to the people who were coming to him. There's the combination of the two. Incredible power shown through incredible kindness. Right? This woman was suffering. The man full of demons was suffering. The disciples on the boat were about to die, and he meets their need in great kindness, and he comes to them, and he shows the immense power, but it's being manifested through great kindness to meet the need of those who are in front of him. It's amazing. And it's not just to impress or to garner clout from the cultural elite. Jesus' kindness is often pointed at the outcasts, the rejected, the unclean, the weak, the people who other people are avoiding. In his interaction with this woman, Jesus is sort of pushing against a whole pile of cultural norms, religious norms, all kinds of things. And he's displaying his power and his holiness through his mercy and his grace. This is how he acts. He's immensely powerful, incredibly powerful. But he brings it to bear on those who are his in immense mercy and kindness and grace. Not on everyone that way. But to those who are his, who come to him as she did, humbly, as Jairus did, humbly, coming to him, to reaching out to him in our need. He doesn't smack our hand away and say, what are you doing? Get your unclean hand out of here, right? No, he meets it with grace and kindness. And this is our next point. Jesus gives us more than we think we need. Jesus gives us more than we think we need. Oftentimes we think we know what we want. This woman is desperate, understandably so. It's right for her to be desperate. And it would have been sufficient to her, I would assume, if things would have simply gone the way that she thought they were going to go. If she could have just slipped in the back, touched the robe, got the healing, and went about her life, to her that would have been more than enough, right? That would have been, for any of us, we'd be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take that. That would have been great. And it makes sense, right? Considering the nature of her uncleanness, for her to go about it that way. If she would have touched anyone else in the crowd, they would have become unclean. They would have been right to be like angry with her. Like, what are you doing? But Jesus, in his kindness, he doesn't let her settle for just receiving something from him. He doesn't let her settle for that. Jesus gives us a lot of some things, right? Common grace, all the things that we enjoy, the goodness of life, food and money and sunshine and swimming pools and kids and all the things, right? There's great things all around us. Great some things. He doesn't just give her something. He doesn't just let her settle for something from him. He gives her someone. He gives her himself. This is why he's interrupting, right? This is why he's asking the question, because he's not letting her just settle with the thing that he's giving her. He's wanting to give her more. He's wanting to give her himself. He could have easily just let the healing happen and keep moving on to seemingly more urgent matters, right? There's a young girl who's dying. But he doesn't. He gives her way more than relief. He pulls her into relationship with him. This is how he operates. He doesn't let us settle for less than what he has for us. This is how discipleship of Jesus is. It's not just us standing around the table of Jesus waiting for some crumbs to fall off the table. No, it's us sitting at the table with Jesus, sharing the meal with him. This is discipleship. It's receiving his stuff, but it's primarily being with him. And he pulls her right into relationship with him. He locks eyes with her. And in doing so, he shatters a lot of conceived notions of what was acceptable at the time. He's shattering things in this moment. On the surface, what she was doing was actively violating the Torah, the law. She was actively violating it. She was bringing her uncleanness to Jesus, which was a violation to the truly clean one. And to the natural mind, to our fleshly mind, it would make total sense for Jesus to scold her in this moment, right? How dare you bring your dirty uncleanness to me? Do you know who I am? I'm the clean one. You don't bring that to me. Who do you think? Are you crazy? You're going to get everyone in this crowd, right? That would make sense, right? That would sort of be a logical reaction to that. But he was doing something more than what was expected in the moment. He was doing a new thing. He's saying, this is a new thing. Instead of her touching Jesus and him becoming unclean, what happens? Her uncleanness doesn't transfer to him. His cleanness transfers to her. It's a reversal. It's a reversal of what was supposed to happen. That's what the law said would have happened. If she would have touched Jesus by the law, Jesus would have become unclean. Everyone in the crowd would have become, that's what we just read in Leviticus. Jesus is saying, no. There's this new thing that's happening now. Your uncleanness doesn't make me unclean when you come to me. My cleanness makes you clean when you come to me. When you bring that uncleanness to me, I give you cleanness. Instead of you giving me, we don't taint him. We don't dirty him. He cleans us. This is the principle, right? It's the same that happened with the leper, right? Jesus to reach his hand out and touch a leper, everyone would have been, you would gasp. But Jesus is like, no, I'm not affected by those things. Because I'm trying not to nerd out on you, okay? There's categories, right? There's clean and there's unclean. We see that in the Old Testament, clean and unclean. And those two categories fit under a category called common. So there's clean and unclean, and there's common. But common has another side of that coin. The antithesis of common is holy, right? So there's holy and there's common. And within common, you can be clean or unclean, right? So Jesus is saying, I'm not just clean, right? You're unclean. I'm not just clean. I'm in a different category altogether. I'm holy, right? So he's not just bouncing back and forth between clean and unclean because Jesus is not common. Everything created is common. Jesus is not created. He is holy. This is why he's not tainted by the uncleanness, because his holiness will always and forever overwhelm our uncleanness. Okay, this is how it works. These are the categories. And it's the same, right? It's the same for us as we interact with him. And so, many of us, maybe we're carrying burdens of uncleanness. Right? This is why Jesus doesn't say, be clean as I'm clean. It's not what he says. What does he say? Be holy as I am holy. He's wanting to take us out of the category that we're in and put us into a new creation, right? Not just different categories, new creation. This is where he takes us in his righteousness. And so maybe we have the burden of uncleanness before God. Maybe it's sin that we have committed. In her case, it was not sin that she had committed. It was something that was being done to her against her will. She didn't choose this. It was happening to her. Her body was producing it against her will. She didn't know where it was coming from. She couldn't do anything in her own power to stop it. Maybe it's sin committed against us. Either way, maybe you bear that weight of feeling like you're an unclean outcast. And maybe you've tried everything that you can think of to take yourself from being unclean to clean. And you keep trying to do that. You keep saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to take myself from unclean to clean. Is that good? And then what happens? Bloop, right back over to unclean. Bloop, right back over to unclean. Bloop, right back over to unclean. And you're exhausted. You've exhausted all of your options, like she has. You're like, and nothing else. I've tried it all. And maybe you think that if you can just get in the general vicinity of Jesus, if I could just get like kind of close, if I could just get in the crowd and just catch just like a little bead on the bottom of the robe. That's not the worst mindset to have, by the way, as we see. That's a mindset of faith, right? And this is what we see here. She's operating from a position of humble faith. I just need whatever you'll give me. Whatever I can get, I'll take. And maybe if we could just get in the general vicinity of Jesus, then maybe he could just fix us up enough so that we can go and we can make the right sacrifices and then we can be clean. But Jesus is way better than that. He's not interested in taking you from unclean to clean. It's not what he came to do. Not at all. He doesn't just throw us some crumbs of grace. He stops and he looks us right in the eye. Right? He says, right here. Don't scurry away. Look here. I'm not just making you clean, I'm making you holy. Because I'm holy. And you're in me. That's how it works. He goes above and beyond what we deserve. Of course we don't deserve that. Are you kidding me? She didn't deserve that. We don't deserve it. And he doesn't just fix our issues from a distance. Right? He's not like the guy from the cable company when you call and say, hey, my internet's down. And he's like, oh, let me look here. Bloop, it's fixed. Like, couldn't you just do that all along? You just push a button and it fixes my internet? Come on. Just keep the button pushed. But that's not how he works, right? He doesn't just solve our problems from a distance and say, okay, call me when you need something. No, right? He shows up, he fixes our internet, and he makes us dinner, and he sits down and watches a movie with us, and he hangs out, and he helps us put the kids to bed, right? No, he's there. He's in. He's with us. He's in relationship with us. He gives us himself. And he welcomes our uncleanness, which is totally counterintuitive. He welcomes it. He says, bring it to me. You're like, wait a second. It's against the law, right, to bring my uncleanness to you? And he's like, no, you have to bring it to me. It's the only way to get rid of it. It's the only way to get from unclean to holy. Right? He is our great high priest. And he's been tempted in every way that we have. It says in Hebrews 4. But he hasn't sinned. He hasn't given in. He has conquered the things that we can't conquer. He has the resources that we need when we need them. That's what it says. We can confidently go to him now with our uncleanness, as she did, and we can approach him with confidence and receive from him what we need. Cleanness? Yeah, but way more. Grace and mercy. When do we need it? In our time of need. Well, that just so happens to be when he's going to give it to us. He's not waiting for you to get your act together. He's not. His holiness always trumps our uncleanness. He says, come to me, all of you who labor and are heavy laden. By what? By trying to make yourself clean. And I will give you what? Rest. I'll give you rest. Shalom, holiness, peace, rest. That's what it is. Jesus, in the midst of her shame, right in the middle of it, meets her. He looks right at her face and says, go, daughter. He calls her daughter. He doesn't just say, hey, lady. He says, daughter. He tells her who she is, right? He gives her identity and says, daughter, your faith has made you well. So come to him in humility and in faith. Bring your sin, bring your uncleanness, bring your anxiety, your fear, your worry. Bring it. And he'll give you what you need. Grace, healing. He doesn't leave you as you are, right? He doesn't say, come to me as you are, and that way we can just affirm it and make sure that everyone else does. It's not what he says. He says, come to me as you are, and I'll give you what you actually need. I don't just leave you the same. Most importantly, he gives us himself. And that's the heart of what it is. And we see that, right? We see that all. Scott and I were talking this week about the guy who the guy who loses all the demons. What does he want? He wants to be with Jesus. He's like, can I be with you? Can I come with you? It's like that's the heart of a person who recognizes what's happening. So bring it. Come to him. Bring where you are, humbly, and lay it down for him, and receive from him what he has. Let's pray. God, we thank you. Father, we just praise you. This doesn't make sense to our flesh, Lord. It doesn't make sense. But you are beyond us, and we recognize that. And so we submit to your ways, and we trust, God, that you are way better than we can imagine. You're just better than we can imagine. Forgive us from limiting you and bringing you to our level and creating you in our own image. Lord, I pray that you would give us courage. I pray that you would give us faith to believe. That we would trust that what you say is right and good. That we wouldn't run from you in our uncleanness, but we would run toward you in our uncleanness. And help us by your Spirit, Lord. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.